What's up, it's Jmo. In this video, I'm going to show you an arcade I made. Is it exactly how you should build an arcade? Probably not. I learned some things, I made some mistakes. Maybe it'll be inspiration for you to build, but I wouldn't follow this as a step-by-step guide. So, enough talking, let's do. I wanted this arcade to be sturdy but easy to move around, and that required a little bit of imagination and engineering on my part. I decided to go with 3/4 inch MDF, but scale the dimensions to fit within a single 4x8 sheet. If you plan ahead and know what your largest straight cuts will be, you can actually have your local Home Depot or Lowe's make those cuts for you, so the sheet's a lot easier to manage. A full sheet of 3/4 inch MDF weighs every bit of 100 pounds, and I like to work smarter, not harder. As you can see, I've taken the large pieces meant to be the sides and clamped them together. For the arcade to look good and sit square, it's important that these pieces be as symmetrical as possible. There's a lot of curves and angles in these sides, so using a table saw just isn't ideal. If you're going to lay your lumber on the ground to make cuts the way I have, it's important to use spacers or large hunks of scrap wood to keep the piece you're cutting as far away from the concrete as possible. Make sure you set your blade depths just past the workpiece, or use sawhorses. The design for the cabinet sides is loosely based on an old Neo Geo cabinet, but I put it on a major diet. Every arcade I've made has actually had a different profile, but that could just mean I like variety in my life. After cutting the sides to shape, I take a trim router, and I cut a slot down the edge. It'll make installing T-molding way easier in the end. Trust me, this is the best time to do this. If you forget this step and you assemble the cabinet first, you kind of have to worry about hitting screws with your router. Not that I know from experience or anything. With the sides done, only a few simple cuts are needed for the front, bottom, and top. The sides need a bit of preparation before the bottom and top can be affixed. I take a scrap piece of the cabinet material, and I draw margins against each edge. I'm also going to lay out a few lines for where the marquee and control panel are going to go. Using offcuts from the sides, I make squares and rectangles that'll index the front, top, bottom, and marquee. I pre-drill each of these so I can countersink the outer faces and save myself from flipping the piece back and forth. Use safety equipment. Gloves, dust masks or respirators when you're cutting and spraying stuff, ear protection when you use loud tools. I'm not responsible for your safety. You are. Take it seriously. Pay attention to how you're holding things that you're going to drive a screw through. As you can see here, my finger's in a bad place, and I get a nice 1/8 inch hole, but I play it off. No need to worry. I'm using number 6 by 1 5/8 inch drywall screws. This may not make sense to most, but I'll explain myself. Wood screws are more expensive than drywall screws. They are better suited for construction because they've got tapered shanks and they're made of stronger materials. I think that's the exact reason why drywall screws are better suited for MDF cabinets. If you over-torque a wood screw, you'll tear through the MDF or crack it. If you trust the self-tapping construction screws, the MDF's tight grain, if you will, causes it to split. If I'm pre-drilling each hole and setting my drill to limit the install torque, I won't have those issues, and drywall screws will hold nice and tight. I've used a lot of screws in this build. Drywall screws work just fine, and they are much easier on your wallet. Anyway, now that we have our indexing blocks in place, we can drill, countersink, and screw the bottom in place. Then drill, countersink, and screw the top in place. Then drill, countersink, and screw the front in place. Gently place the other side on. And now drill, countersink, and screw all of the same places on the obverse side. Run a few screws through the side for stability. Make sure you have your supervisor check your work. If your cuts are square, and your index blocks are true on either side, you should have a freestanding structure at this point. Let's check with management. Not amused. Nailed it. Here, I use a few of those reference lines that I made earlier to install and level what will be the bottom of the marquee. This is also a good place to mount speakers later. Now to drill, countersink, and screw on the lower portion of the front control panel. It's important to get this right because it gives the arcade its character. cut an angled piece of MDF to fill in the rest of the front panel, and I'm gluing it in with liquid nails to keep the front somewhat clean. For the control surface itself, I wanted to be able to access the buttons and joysticks for troubleshooting and maintenance, so I set it flush against the side of the arcade, marked the holes for my brackets, and drilled pilot holes for the screws. You don't want these screws penetrating. Once the brackets are on, it's time to drill the arcade frame to match and shove a few flathead bolts through to act as a hinge. The neat part about this approach is the ability to lock everything in place by just adding a few screws. To mount the monitor, I used a cut of MDF that would allow me lots of adjustment later on. The viewing angle of the screen can completely make or break an arcade. I marked the center and drilled holes for a swivel VESA mount. At this point, we have a lot of MDF, a whole lot of screws, and what is starting to look like a fun place to spend your free time. In the next video, things will really come together. If you made it this far, thank you for taking the time to watch. If you liked it, leave a like, leave a comment, and please do check out the next video.